Well, good morning and welcome. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, which is entitled "What the Business Community Has to Do to Be Prepared for Next Year." We're going to take a look at the opportunities and threats. As you all know, this is day 2 of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce and day 2 of my role as chairman of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce for next year. I am Rick Beasley, the Executive Director of Career Source South Florida. And as you all know, the Chamber's Goals Conference is a time where we take the time to set our priorities and key objectives for our work over the next year, working with our committees. Today's session is to set the tone for addressing key issues at the federal and state level, and to moderate a Q&A session that brings together in South Florida and what our business community should be focusing on the various committees as they set their goals for next year. Now, as you all know, we'll be setting our goals in our breakout sessions on Monday and Tuesday. And so I'm gonna take a little time to give a brief recap on day 1. So yesterday we had our official installation of our board and officials and our officers of the chamber. We had a wonderful presentation for the State of the Chamber address by our very own President and CEO, Alfred Sanchez. And then we had key updates on key issues dealing with resiliency, transportation, housing, COVID, business recovery from our Miami-Dade County's Chief Operating Officer, Jimmy Morales. And Jimmy also gave us a chance to be introduced to our new Director and CEO of the department, Miami-Dade County's Department of Transportation and Public Works, which is Mr. Eulois Cleckley. And we're bringing Eulois in from Denver. We're so excited about him coming in. So let me take this brief opportunity to again thank our Gold Conference sponsors. The Chamber's work could not be possible without your support. And so thank you to our sponsors. Our sponsors today's webinar is going to be Pfizer and Florida International University. And so I'm going to take this time to give our good friend, Shane, who is the, let me go over my notes. I want to take this time, well, let me back up, I'm going too far. Before I turn it over to our panel, let me first go back and say thank you to Pfizer and to Florida International University. And before I turn it over to our panel, I first want to go through the logistics and how things are run for today. And then number 2, I'll give our sponsors an opportunity to make some brief comments. All right, so again, logistically wise for this webinar, microphones will be muted. Please use the chat box for any comments, exchange of ideas, sharing of information. Please use the chat box. If you have any questions of any of our speakers, please make sure that you use the Q&A section or feature of the Zoom meeting. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Chamber's website later on today. So now for our sponsor remarks, I want to take this opportunity to allow our sponsors to speak. And my good friend, and we go back and forth, but I am so grateful that Pfizer is a good partner for our chamber. And so please, friends, let's welcome Shane Caldwell, who is the Vice President of Business Development and Strategy for Pfizer. So Shane, we'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, Rick, and thank you so much. And I'm also enjoying not only our friendship, but I'm expecting great things from you, as I'm sure Alfred is as well. So with that being said, you've got my support, that of Pfizer's, to not only make you successful, because we do that, we know the chamber overall is going to be successful. And it has been my honor to represent Pfizer. For those that don't know Pfizer, I'll just give you a 30-second interview or a catch up, as I gave you a really more of a detailed introduction yesterday. But what I want to do say is that this particular event, which is really an important one for us, as it is the year-end event, helps us understand where this chamber is going, why we want to stay involved, and more importantly, what it does is it gives me a chance to get to know not only board members, the executive office, but the members, period. And so I look forward to next year as the presenting sponsor in order to have a face-to-face with the entire cadre of all our membership, so that we just keep furthering our relationship. So having said all of that, who's Pfizer? So Pfizer is a company that you can think of us in 2 different ways. We're a global organization of 44,000 associates, with 2,000 of those associates being right here in the Miami area, sorry, South Florida, and that obviously includes Miami, Coral Springs area for us. And what we bring in these, as I tell you a little bit about who we are, is a company that does issuing. So for all the bankers that are out there, a lot of them, probably a good 90% or so, know who Fiserv is. We've got a little over 12,000 plus bank clients and all of their outlets that run on our platform. And then we have some 6 million plus customers who are part of our merchant processing story. So again, issuing and processing of credit card transactions is what Fiserv does. Now, that is not only the thing that we do. We are in a global organization, and as we narrow it down to why we're involved in community, what you see in the very back of me here is this campaign that I'm also one of 3 hosts for, and it's called the Main Street Momentum Tour. What is that? Well, as I introduced to the chamber last year, this program that my CEO, Frank Bisignano, pushed for, which was Back to Business, was all about making sure that the merchants who were going through the pandemic had an opportunity to get back to business. We invested 10 million, saw how well that went, popped up to 50 million in our to invest in order to bring businesses back by giving them $10,000 grants. We did that by being feet on the street. And so this chamber was very key to helping me amplify the program, push that message. So now what we've done is we're going to do this Main Street tour where we talk to our 12,000 plus clients, bring a bit of a show, so to speak, to the location, which then galvanizes merchants to show up, understand our flagship Clover. Clover is a product that we use to push transactions, allow merchants to create client engagement with their customers, loyalty with their customers, manage their business, obviously, overall, but more importantly, get them healthy. And that is really our key focus. And I think that's the key focus of this chamber, is to make sure that our merchants are successful. When we do that, it's a ripple effect throughout the community. It's a ripple effect throughout its citizenry, and it's a healthy experience. Large companies, like Fiserv, are really keen on community, more so than ever before. We've been doing this for over 40 years as an organization, but we've really been laser focused here as of maybe the last 6 years. And then with this pandemic, it just totally heightened our awareness to stay attached to the community, which is why over the last 6 years in my community chamber involvement, I'm now sitting on boards or advisory groups in a number of chambers for the sole purpose that I believe in chambers. I believe this chamber runs neck and neck with probably the next strongest chamber in the world, and that would be the London Chamber of Commerce. But aside from that, here in the United States, we're number one. And I say we're number one because of how well this chamber is organized. Where I want us to get to is the same place that Rick mentioned getting us to, as well as Alfred yesterday. Let us be nationally number one without spot or wrinkle. What does that mean? That means we've got to concentrate on membership. That means we've got to make sure that we are the haven between us and the government. And you're going to hear a lot about the government, where those matters are, but the chambers play a critical role in all of that. So as I wrap up and kick it over to the other sponsor, FIU, I'll say this. As I heard yesterday, what needed to be done, I'm raising my hand as part of this, as part of the chamber member, and say that I will do my best to make sure that we increase membership. So it's not just talk. What that's going to mean is I've got a couple of programs that I haven't had a chance to announce yet to this chamber that I want to bring to the chamber and the membership committee as how we galvanize these merchants around the Miami area to join the chamber, and why they need to join the chamber, and why they're going to be successful by being in this chamber. So I look forward to the challenge. I look forward to beating 20%, because I think that's a low bar. I think we set a higher bar and let 20% increase in our membership be the minimum. So that's going to be my goal. I look forward to helping Rick and Alfred get there, as well as all of the officers and executives. So with that being said, I kick it back to you, Rick. Looking forward to the journey this year.
Again, Shane, thank you. I really appreciate you wanting to set that bar for us. I think that's going to be outstanding leadership from one of our business members. So thank you again. Again, thank you for all the support that you've given to this chamber. So next up, from Florida International University, Dr. William Hardin. We're so glad that you're here, sir. He is our interim dean for FIU's College of Business and professor of finance and real estate. Dr. Hardin is a Knight Ridder Endowed Scholar Chair, and also the Tapar Sheila Holo Research Fellow, and oh, so much going on here, and the co-editor of the Journal of Real Estate and Research. Dr. Hardin, the floor is yours. Hardin, the floor is yours, and we're so glad that you're here today.
All right, thank you, Rick. I appreciate that introduction. Academia is a lot like certain other businesses. They give you a lot of titles, and it makes you feel good, and recognition of things. So many titles I've had, and but my number one title is educator, a business educator. And my goal is to make sure that we have educated people in South Florida who meet the needs of the companies moving here and the companies growing here in South Florida. So thank you. I am Bill Hardin, the interim dean of the College of Business. I want to thank the entire Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce for bringing us together today to explore the challenges that our community has today with COVID, and in the future as we grow and as we're constrained by climate change and other issues. It's a great place to be, a lot of innovation, and it's important to have everyone come on board. Let me talk a little bit about FIU Business. The group I lead, the organization I lead, we term FIU Business, is a solution center. Many people in Miami don't know all the facts about the College of Business, but we're ranked number 2 in the country for our undergraduate international business program by US News and World Report. And our graduate programs are highly ranked as well, including number 3 for our international MBA program. Another few notes of interest are our decades of leadership in distance and online learning and education, our breadth of programs, and the fact that we graduate more master's level students than all but a few schools. So we're creating human capital, and in the world that we live in, human capital matters. So what is the impact? Basically, well-educated business professionals in the community who will be leaders in the future. And if you look at the leaders in South Florida, you will find that many of them have that FIU logo attached to them. We are driven by our mission, and our mission is to educate. I want to talk about 3 other specific things. However, in addition to our core undergraduate education mission, undergraduate education is our core mission within the College of Business and at FIU, but it's really just a small part of what we do. First, in the College of Business, we have the Small Business Development Center, Sbdc at FIU. The Sbdc helps small businesses in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties with customized consulting at no cost. We run many programs, webinars, videos, and training for firms. So if you need help in applying for a loan or building a marketing plan, or any other business challenges, we can help that. That's what we do at the Sbdc at FIU. Number 2, our second area of contribution, in addition to our core mission, is our FIU Business Executive Education Group. These programs that we offer give targeted tools in many of the areas we're concerned in, such as DEI, leadership, and data analytics. These are short-term programs that drive better strategic decisions, better strategic thinking, and day-to-day management of firms. We also customize programs when people need a little bit more specificity. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the Chapman Graduate School of Business, as I served as the associate dean for that for 3 years prior to my present position. The Chapman Graduate School of Business offers over 25 graduate programs, including MBAs, specialized master's degrees, online and in-person programs. One of our newest programs is a sports management MBA that we're offering in collaboration with Real Madrid. Some of you may have heard of Real Madrid, which is, of course, one of the most well-known brands in soccer globally. We also have several new programs in data analytics and a new MBA focused on data analytics. Each of our programs are driven by what is needed in the community. So we try to analyze and evaluate what benefits South Florida and Miami. And we've been very good at doing that over our last couple of decades. So please reach out to us for FIU Business if you have any questions. And of course, our campus is open. Our 1101 Brickell campus for business is open. I'd simply want to thank everybody for the opportunity of taking a couple of minutes here to outline what maybe some people know a lot about and maybe other people are just learning about in the community, which is FIU Business. I will challenge, however, everyone to look around and see who that they deal with on a day-to-day business activity. And my guess is that if you really ask people, you couldn't do what you do today if it weren't for FIU Business. So thank you.
So, Dean Hardin, thank you so much for sharing all the wonderful things happening over at FIU. We're so grateful for your support and what the institution is doing for this wonderful community. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce our fearless leader, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Alfred Sanchez. With that, Alfred, take it away. Thank you for what you do, sir.
Thanks, Rick. Look, congratulations again on your election as chair. You know, you're joining a long time and extremely talented, committed leaders who've left their marks on Miami, and I know you're going to do the same, my friend. I'm proud to serve alongside you, not only because of your prowess as a leader, which you and I have known each other for many years, and I've known of that prowess, but also because together we're furthering the Chamber's important commitment to inclusion. Having you as the second African-American chair to head this board is a fact that I know all of the Chamber celebrates. So congratulations again. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this very important portion of our Goals Conference. As Rick shared, today's session is about gaining a deeper understanding of the issues which will undoubtedly impact our work as a chamber and your work as committee and community leaders. We'll hear from two true champions of businesses who have worked tirelessly tilling the soil across the US and Florida to ensure we grow healthy and bountiful business crops. How's that for a Florida metaphor? Look, we're going to hear first from U.S. Chamber's Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer, Neil Bradley, who will fill us in on the important initiatives and legislations we're going to have to be aware of and support in this coming year on a national level. Then we'll hear from Mark Wilson, the President and CEO of the Florida Chamber. He's going to render the Florida's political and business landscape for us. Now, we'll have time at the end of the session for questions and answers. Please use the Q&A box to float those questions up to us, and I'm going to moderate a Q&A portion with Mark and Marty Durbin, who's the President of Global Energy Institute, representing the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As you can imagine, things are quite active these days in DC. Last night, the president announced that a bipartisan deal had been struck on the important $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, something that's extremely important to us here in South Florida. We spoke yesterday of some of those initiatives. Neil is sending his apologies because he has to submit his presentation in a pre-recorded format because he needs to be on the Hill today to attend to all of our businesses. So we can't begrudge him that, and we wish him a great deal of luck. They're doing a great job up there. He asked Marty Durbin, an equally accomplished chamber professional, to join us to be able to answer some of your questions. I had a chance to talk to Marty yesterday, and I think you'll be very pleased with his level of expertise, as I was. So look, let's get started. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead and roll the program?
to be with you all today. Talk a little bit about the issues confronting our nation as we come out of this once in a century global pandemic, as we plot a future for greater economic health and recovery. I want to extend special appreciation from all of my colleagues at the U.S. Chamber to Alfred. Our great partnership with him and his team, and really the entire Miami Chamber, really helps us in the advocacy we do here in Washington, D.C. And it's always just a great pleasure to be able to reconnect with you all. I also want to extend my congratulations to Irene White, the outgoing chairman of the Greater Miami Chamber. What a year to serve. And we can't thank you enough for your willingness to step forward and help the Miami community and, frankly, businesses headquartered there and who operate around the world to navigate this global pandemic. And of course, Rick, big shoes to fill, but we're looking forward to working with you in your new role as chairman of the board there. Let me talk a little bit about where we see the U.S. economy today, some of the opportunities and some of the challenges. You know, if a year ago, as we were enduring shutdowns and really just a total collapse in our economy with an unknown duration, if you would have asked where would we be a year from now, I don't know that any of us would have predicted that we would be on the cusp of a great resurgence, but that's exactly where we are today. We saw some sectors of our economy recover really quickly last summer as part of the pandemic. Think about home building and transportation and logistics services and warehousing, and even technology, the technology we're using to communicate today. While we saw others continue to suffer, particularly in the leisure and hospitality industry and sports and entertainment. But even those sectors are now coming back. And if trend lines continue, we're going to be at a point where by the beginning of 2022, the economy will be in a stronger position than it was scheduled to be on, predicted to be on the baseline that we were on even before the pandemic. That presents a whole host of opportunities, both for job creation, greater wealth creation, and new business formation. And so we're excited about the opportunity that the economy has before us. But there are several challenges that we're going to have to navigate along the way. At top of mind, really, for all of our members, and I suspect for many of you as well, is the worker shortage crisis. And we don't use the term crisis at the U.S. Chamber lightly, but it is just that. It's a crisis. Every industry that you go into, every employer, doesn't matter how small or how large, in whatever sector of the economy, is reporting that their biggest challenge is finding skilled workers for the jobs that they have open today. You probably see it there in Miami as well. Stores, restaurants that were on the cusp of being fully reopened and every table full, and that are shutting down for a day or a particular meal service because they don't have the staff. The commercial construction industry, of which we just released a survey of, reported that nearly 1 in 3 commercial construction contractors were turning down work because they didn't have the bodies to do the work. That's the kind of problem that can kind of hold back our economy. It's not, however, a new problem. If you think back to January of 2020, before the pandemic, the biggest crisis we had confronting us back then was a growing worker shortage. Well, we're now back to a place where we have the same worker shortage, but the problems have been compounded by COVID-19. There's not one singular cause for the shortage in workers today, and therefore there's not one single answer. But at the U.S. Chamber, we've been focusing on a multitude of solutions that can help address the problem, including right-sizing our unemployment benefits. Kudos to the governor there in Florida, who joined now 25 other governors in ending the $300 weekly supplement early. We're tracking a number of other governors who are also taking steps to provide return to work bonuses. We did a recent survey at the U.S. Chamber of those who were employed before the pandemic and who are currently unemployed. And one of the greatest motivating factors to get out and take a job is the prospect of a return to work bonus. Obviously, the sooner that we can get those people back in the workforce, the sooner that stores and manufacturers and contractors can be up and fully open. We also know that the skills gap is a problem that has to be addressed. And so we're working in Washington. We're also encouraging governors and state capitals to use some of the COVID relief funding that they receive from the federal government to do employer-led rapid retraining programs, making sure that if people need to adjust their skills for the jobs that are open today, they have the opportunity to do that. Immigration is also going to have to be part of the answer as well. Pre-pandemic, we faced the challenge that we had more demand for our temporary visa programs than the visas that were allowed under federal law. We were hard at work beginning to change that before the pandemic hit, and now that work has picked up again anew. That means increasing the number of H-2B seasonal worker visas, increasing the number of H-1B high-skill visas, getting J-1 visas back, and increasing the overall level of permanent immigration based on employment factors and needs. In fact, at the Chamber, we've called for doubling that employment-based immigration levels, and just last week, we had a bipartisan group of House members who introduced legislation to do just that with respect to seasonal workers. In the Senate, we have legislators who are working on a similar approach for ag workers. And so while those are parts of the solution, we're encouraged by the fact that lawmakers are beginning to take these challenges seriously and begin to address this worker shortage crisis. When we think about other challenges to the economy, it is really some of the proposals that are bandying about Washington today. You've probably heard of the president's proposal, embraced by some in Congress, to return the United States to having the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world, nearly doubling the tax rate on capital gains investments. These and some of the other tax increases that the president's proposed would just be devastating for American businesses and for our economy. Thanks to the 2017 tax reforms, American businesses are finally on a level playing field with their foreign competitors. And then if this change went through, we'd be right back having a major disadvantage. That means it's better, more advantageous for companies to be headquartered abroad in the United States. And of course, that's something that none of us should want to see. I'm confident, and my colleagues at the Chamber are confident, that we can beat back some of these misguided tax increases, but we have to keep the pressure on our members of Congress to make sure that they understand that raising taxes, particularly as we come out of a pandemic, is the absolute worst thing you could do if you want to see a return to growth. If that's a particular challenge, there are also opportunities, particularly around long-needed investments in infrastructure. So at the U.S. Chamber, and I know there at the Miami Chamber, we've been calling for increased investments in roads and bridges and the port system and broadband and transit and our water and wastewater systems and in resiliency to address climate change for years now. Republicans and Democrats in Congress and in different administrations gave lip service to the call, but we never seemed to make meaningful progress. Well, now we're on the cusp of a major bipartisan deal that would invest over $1 trillion in those core infrastructure projects. I'm actually quite optimistic that this deal can come together and become law. It's going to involve some hard decisions about how to finance it, but there's some creativity going along, occurring right now, I think, that can provide us a path forward. Perhaps the biggest threat today is that some want to hold that $1 trillion investment in infrastructure hostage to $5 trillion in unrelated spending. Well, that's simply another recipe to be right back where we've been before, which is failing to make the investments in infrastructure that our economy needs. If we can get that investment in infrastructure done, we can make the improvements that will make businesses and our economy more efficient. If we can solve the worker shortage crisis, and there are ways that I talked about to do just that, then I think we're on path to be exactly where we want to be, a growing and expanding economy at the end of this year that can make America and our fellow citizens all more prosperous. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, though there in Miami, in Tallahassee, and of course in engaging with your lawmakers here in Washington, D.C. to make sure they understand the consequences when they get policies right and the consequences when they get policies wrong. Together, I'm quite confident that we can make the bold moves that will make this the next great American century. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Oh, thanks. That's our thanks to Neil. That was an incredibly informative presentation. And please remember, all of our chamber leaders who are online today, please put your Q&A in the Q&A tab so that we can, after Mark's presentation, we get to your questions. Next, let me bring up our very good friend, Mark Wilson from the Florida Chamber. He's going to give us the Florida picture, but before I turn it over to Mark, on behalf of all of our members and all of our business owners, Mark, I want to thank you and your team for the incredible leadership, a spectacular job, really, that you've done, especially through this COVID crisis. You've kept us all informed, and you've really shown a bright light for all of us to make sure that we stay on course, especially our legislators. You've done a yeoman's work, and we're really proud to be members of the Florida Chamber. Take it away, Mark.
All right. Well, Alfred, thanks so much. And I really appreciate the invitation today. When I received it, there was no way we weren't going to make this work today. Obviously, we all wish we were in person. Rick Beasley, congratulations on your chairmanship. Very much looking forward to continuing our friendship and our professional partnership. Miami's obviously an incredibly important part of an incredibly important state. And as I often say, you know, the entire economy of Greece would fit inside the economy of Miami. And Miami is a big deal, not just in Florida, but globally. And I'm glad we're all on the same page. So, Alfred, thanks for that introduction. And what I wanted to do today is we actually put a lot of time into this particular presentation because we know that when a Chamber of Commerce is trying to do more than support the chamber, when a chamber is trying to lead a region, when a chamber is trying to unify the business community for good, then it's worth fighting for and it's worth partnering together for. I know that this presentation is part of a bigger goals conference. And so I want to get to giving you as much information as I can that if I were in your shoes, I would want to know when it comes time to making decisions about the future of the county and the future of the region. This presentation will be available for anybody who wants it. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A period as well. I'm super easy to reach. You can see email address right there. But Alfred, I too appreciate the partnership that the Florida Chamber has with the Miami Chamber, and candidly with over 250 local chambers all over this great state of Florida. And also whether we're working with, you know, Bill Talbert at the convention side or Michael Finney on the economic development side, the secret sauce is that we're all working together and that we're doing it in a unified way. My pitch to all of you is to really start this discussion by thinking about what would happen if all of the leaders in Miami-Dade County, from the school board to the county commission to local chambers to EDOs to your 24 members of your your Florida legislative delegation, what would happen if everyone was pushing for the same goals and using the same measurements and the same goals? I think it would set Miami-Dade County apart from most other parts of the world. And I want to encourage you to think about ways of doing that. The last perspective I would give you before I start my presentation is, you know, when chambers of commerce step up and want to do bold things, again, whether it's the Coral Gables Chamber or the Miami Chamber or the Pensacola Chamber, the Orlando Chamber or the Florida Chamber, you know, we have a perspective here, and that is that there's only one legitimate excuse for a chamber of commerce, and it's simple: it's leadership. And chambers, when they're at their best, are doing things in a community that can only be done by unifying disparate groups in a community together for a common vision. So I think that's what you all are up to. I think that's what you're trying to accomplish. And I pledge our support to work together in ways that would be helpful. So, all right, with that said, as you all work on goals for the region, I just wanted to give a little bit of backdrop of Florida. I know you're looking at what are the things you need to be prepared for over the next year. At the Florida Chamber, we have a 10-year look at where can Florida be by the end of the decade. So I won't get into all the details, but big picture, if Florida was a country, we would be the 17th largest economy on the planet. We're bigger than Saudi Arabia for perspective. Our goal is to be the 10th largest economy in the world in 10 years. And to do that, we have 39 specific goals that must be met. And they range from early learning, kindergarten readiness, all the way to resiliency for every resident of Florida. We're not going to get into those 39 goals today, but nevertheless, it's very important that we all get united around the right things happening in Florida. Very big picture. We're going to add 4 million more people in Florida in 10 years, and we need to create 2 million new private sector jobs, and I'll speak to the Miami-Dade part of that in just a moment. If you look at pre-COVID numbers on tourism, we are going to add another 50 million annual visitors to our state in just a decade. You all will be the benefactors of much of that, and we project we'll have 3 million more drivers on our roads in just 10 years. So be thinking about what autonomous could mean for that. Be thinking about how are we going to do all of this, and what could a Chamber of Commerce do to help lead a community through these answers. This is what we're doing statewide, and very much looking forward to partnering with you. Okay, a couple of quick numbers here, and we don't have time to go through all of this, but here's the bottom line. We're the third largest state in the country. I think everybody knows that. But if you look at the pre-COVID numbers, we were adding 900 people a day to Florida's population. By the way, 810 of them are from another country or another state. That's split about 50-50, so be thinking about that. We talked about visitors, but what you might not know is for the last 5 years, Florida has created 1 out of every 11 new American jobs, and that's for 5 years in a row. But I circled a couple of key items here that I would want to know if I were you. My partner, Neil, at the U.S. Chamber, where I used to work, talked about this workforce crisis, and it's a crisis in 50 states. But look at the top right number there that I circled. Right now, today, we have 512,900 open jobs in Florida that cannot find people to fill them. But we only have 503,000 people looking to fill those jobs. So said differently, we literally have more open jobs in Florida than we have people to fill them. Who better to be your chair of your chamber than Rick Beasley and the Career Source folks? Perfect chair at the perfect time to help solve this crisis. The other numbers I have there, the unemployment rate is going up. That's actually a good thing because it means that more people are now actively looking for work. So numbers matter and interpretation matters. If you look at the 566,900, that's the number of jobs that we've created over the last year in Florida, year over year. It's red because that number actually went down compared to the month before. But anyway, these are statewide numbers and they matter. But if we look at Miami-Dade, and by the way, all this is available for you for free. Just go to the floridastorecard.org and click on the Miami tab and Miami-Dade tab. All of this is there. Couple of key points I want to share with you right up front here. So you are going to add somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 to 700,000 net new residents over the next decade. And how you do that is going to determine, whether you become the future that you want for Miami or whether you're going to become Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, where nobody wants to live. So you get to decide, and it's a choice that you get to make. In terms of jobs, you need to create 201,000 new jobs in the county over the next decade. I can't imagine what would happen if the school board, the county commission, the city council, every chamber, every EDC, the Career Source Regional Board, if you all got together and used these goals to make every single decision that you make, from a parking decision to an education decision, then nothing will unify everybody together like common goals. Look what I have circled here. You have 126,000 children in poverty in the county. Your third grade reading scores, they were 60% last year. They just fell to 57% just the other day. So 57% of your third graders are reading at or above grade level in third grade. See that other number there, the wealth migration number? It's red. That means that you have more wealth leaving the county generally than moving in. An asterisk here would be this is immediately pre-COVID. I would imagine these numbers are going to be different when the new numbers come out, but nevertheless important to know. All right, here's a statewide look with a little bit of Miami-Dade perspective. So if you look at pre-COVID numbers, Florida is actually down 454,000 jobs compared to where we were pre-COVID. So that's what we have to do to get back to pre-COVID levels. Look at Miami-Dade County. You have 128,000 fewer jobs today in the county than you had pre-COVID. Again, something to be focused on. Here's a statewide look. I don't have time today to go into the regional look, but if you look at the 454,000 jobs that were down, here's the breakdown by industry. As you can see, about half of all the jobs that were down in Florida are in the leisure and hospitality sector. But notice on financial services, for example, notice that some sectors are actually ahead of where they were pre-COVID. This recovery is very uneven from an industry standpoint. It's very uneven from a geographical standpoint. There are parts of Florida that are well ahead of where they were pre-COVID. There's parts of Florida like your region and in Central Florida that are obviously still have quite a ways to go. So uneven recovery, something we got to be paying attention to. Now, as a pilot, I often talk about headwinds and tailwinds, and I'm going to quickly go through, some things that are tailwinds for us that are good. I want to go through a couple of headwinds, and then I want to leave you with some context, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Alfred. So in terms of things that are wind at our back, the legislative session that just happened, kudos to the legislature. We are protected from COVID liability lawsuits, from frivolous lawsuits anyways. Also, we finally passed remote sales tax collection, which will really help your local retailers. And we're going to use that extra dollars that are coming in to stop or mitigate an unemployment tax increase for local businesses in Florida. We're also going to buy down. Florida is the only state in the country that charges a tax on business rentals. Now, New York City does it as well, but we're the only state. We're going to use the sales tax collections to buy that down. So this will help make Florida more competitive. And it's not something a lot of people noticed. Obviously, the legislature pushed and passed for further workforce development and alignment. That's alignment to where we're trying to take our economy. Everybody on the call knows how important workforce is. And of course, we pushed for additional resiliency funding and additional environmental protections. And the legislature and the governor clearly did that. I want to give a shout out to your chamber. We put together over 100 chambers of commerce in our COVID liability protection. And I just want to thank Alfred and the team there. The Miami Chamber was certainly part of our coalition and a part of helping us get this passed. Also, in terms of tailwinds behind us, I don't know how many of you saw this, but we talked about this last year. Thank goodness for New York, Illinois, California, New Jersey. They were sending a lot of business to Florida. And of course, the real business person of the year was our governor. And I'm not trying to get into political statements here, but even Neil, the speaker before us, acknowledged that our governor's making decisions that other governors are not making. And it's helping Florida recover faster, and it's helping Florida with our economic diversity. Now, a couple of things for you all to consider in terms of headwinds, things that are coming against us. A lot of talk about bipartisan this and bipartisan this in Washington. I think only a fool thinks that much is happening in Washington that's good. There's a lot of talk about it, but we as Floridians need to realize there's a lot we can do to move Florida in the right direction. There's not a lot we can do to fix the mess that exists in Washington. We're going to pray for them. We're going to work with them. We're going to lobby them. But at the end of the day, I do not encourage you to sit around and hope that things in Washington are somehow going to become less partisan, or that Washington's going to somehow start putting the long term ahead of the short term. We have some really good, smart members of the Florida congressional delegation. and they work in a bipartisan way, but they're working in an environment right now that I'm not all that optimistic is going to do much more than talk. Next year is an incredibly important election year across the country, including right here in Florida. Next item on here, I call it apathetic bliss. And I don't want to offend anybody here, but Florida's doing better than most of the rest of the country. And many business leaders, would say, oh, we're better than New York or we're better than Illinois, but don't realize that if we're not careful, the very same forces that made New York and Illinois and California what they are hard at work in Florida. And the next point here is that free enterprise isn't free. We actually have to fight for it. It's why you should join chambers of commerce. It's why chambers need to step up and provide leadership and guidance to make sure that our elected leaders are making the right decisions that help diversify our businesses and help diversify our economy. Also follow the facts, champion the facts. I'm going to show you that in a second. Be careful of a fragmented business community. This is, we can take on our opponents, but when the business community is fragmented and not united, it's hard to get much done. Let me remind you all, we have a very broken legal climate in Florida. In fact, we have the 5th worst legal climate in the United States, and it's absolutely killing our property insurance business. You've seen your rates go up. People might want to blame the insurance company for this. We should all talk to our politicians and ask them to continue reforming the system. We need more competition. We need more insurance companies in Florida providing more products so that competition can drive prices down. In order to do that, we have to fix our broken liability problems. Partisan stucks, I mentioned that earlier. And of course, the workforce crisis that's already been discussed. Couple quick things, Alfred, and then I'm going to head it back over your direction here in a minute. The Florida Chamber political team is, I think everyone knows, we're very engaged in politics. We have 12 or 13 PACs, a couple of C4s. We spend more money in Florida campaigns over the last 2 cycles than the U.S. Chamber did in the entire country. So this is a big deal to us, and we take it seriously. So we're always polling in Florida. And here's a headwind I want us all to pay attention to. If you look at voters in Florida under 40 years old and you ask the question, which is better, socialism or capitalism? About the same. 42% say capitalism's better, 42% say socialism's better. There's a huge division based on your party registration. So folks, we've got to be including our next generation in all of these discussions about the future of our community and about why free enterprise matters. So I thought you needed to see that. I talked about the importance of facts. And, we heard from Dean Hardin just a little bit ago from one of the best schools in the United States. Here's the deal. For 5 years in a row, U.S. News and World Report has said that our colleges and universities in Florida are #1 in the nation for 5 years in a row. We just asked voters if they thought this was true. Check this out. 56% of voters said they don't believe that, right? Only about 30% said that it is true. We in the business community need to do a better job informing our employees and our neighbors, our vendors and friends about the truth about what's going on in Florida if we expect the momentum to continue. In terms of things to be careful about, constitutional amendments. You might remember pregnant pigs have rights in the Florida Constitution, which is supposed to be about people. There are 32 active constitutional amendments that are filed for the 2022 election. We monitor this closely, something to pay very close attention to. And then finally, a couple of things I want to give you some context for. So right there in Dade County, I mentioned this, 57% of your 3rd graders are reading at grade level. Your superintendent does a phenomenal job, one of the best in the country. Which isn't time to blame teachers and schools. This is a time for the business community to ask, what can we do at the school level, at the neighborhood level, to help ensure that 100% of our 3rd graders are ready for kindergarten and then are reading at or above grade level by the time they get to 3rd grade. So get engaged here. It's incredibly important. Go to the FloridaGapMap.org if you want to see what's going on at your school as opposed to just at the county. Also, I mentioned kids in poverty. In Florida, we have over 800,000 kids living in poverty. Over half of them live in just 15% or 150 of our zip codes. get engaged here, find out what can the Miami Chamber and other chambers in the area do to help cut childhood poverty in half over the next decade. Incredibly important. Also, just a look at what's going on with the electorate in Miami-Dade County. I know you all have started a PAC. Congratulations on getting in on that business. Here's where you were when the presidential election happened. On the left side there, you can see you had about 1.5 million registered voters. You have slightly more than that right now. But if you look at last month's voter registration for Miami-Dade, about half of all new registrations are no party affiliate. And in Florida, in a couple years, we're going to be, number one will be Democrat registration. Number two will be no party affiliate. Number three will be Republican. That'll happen in the next 5 or 6 years or so if the trends continue. Speaking locally here, you have over 85 local races coming up. I want to thank the Miami Chamber for being a partner with us on our Florida Institute for Political Leadership. We do not endorse at the local level, but we're very engaged in helping recruit candidates and help train candidates on how to run for office. Democrats, independents, Republicans, doesn't matter to us. Here are all the races that you had or have in 2021. Look what's coming up in 2022. Go to FIPL website if you're interested in learning more. And then finally, for all of you, as you go into your goals conference for the rest of it next week, be thinking about the 6 pillars and, what can your chamber, what can you be doing? So, the first one is education and workforce. Then the second one is innovation and economic development. Then we have infrastructure. Then we have business climate competitiveness. And then we have governance. Think about it. All these cities, all these counties, 34 state agencies, 67 counties, 405 cities. How can we all get to this point where we have the same goals? And then, of course, quality of life, healthcare, and so forth. So we can do better, but the only way we're going to do it is by uniting together. And then finally, imagine here's our Miami-Dade County metrics. This is a scorecard that every business in Miami-Dade can have on your website right now. Every school district, every chamber. What would happen if all the leaders in Miami-Dade actually were trying to accomplish the same goals? Whether that's how many jobs you need to create. Remember, I said it's just over 200,000. Whether it's kindergarten readiness, whether it's 3rd grade reading, whether it's cutting in half, the number of children that are in poverty. This absolutely can be done, but it cannot be done with a divided community. And then finally, if you're not part of what we're working on with helping the next generation with scholarships, we just launched together with the Florida Prepaid College Foundation a $20 million initiative to make college scholarships available for people that otherwise would not have the opportunity. I want to thank my good friend Madeline for being a big part of this. And I hope everybody in the community will help us bring educational opportunities to zip codes, to neighborhoods, to families that otherwise wouldn't have it. So Alfred, looking forward to the Q&A portion. Obviously, this is where people could download the presentation. We'll make sure that you have it as well. Appreciate our friendship and partnership, and I'll turn the floor back over to you.
Thanks, Mark. That was incredibly informative. Thank you for that. A lot of people are asking about getting the deck, so we'll drop that link in the chat, but also later on today, we'll have this recording posted on our website, and we'll also have a link to that as well. All right. So listen, I think we've got some incredibly important information. There's a couple of questions that I wanted to be able to share. Let me start by saying, I think right now, and I know you're pessimistic. You have a reason to be, Mark, about the infrastructure. I mean, about what's going on in DC. But I did want to welcome onto the platform with us Marty Durbin. Marty, are you there?
Yeah. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Folks, can we turn Marty? There we go. Thanks, Marty, for being with us today. We had a great presentation from Neil, and hopefully, I think you got most, if not all, of Mark's presentation.
Yeah.
I did want to start with that infrastructure bill because obviously it's hot on the news right now. We heard from the president yesterday saying that they've reached a bipartisan deal. It's great to hear that. I kind of share Mark's skepticism about how long that will hold, but it's great to hear it around such an important issue. But we still have to get it voted on, and so I'm wondering where we are in that regard from our congressional leaders, and what can we do as business leaders and as a chamber to make sure that gets voted on, gets pushed through.
Sure, that's an important question, and it was great to hear Mark's presentation as well. And I share his skepticism, but we've also got to have some optimism about trying to get these critical things done. I would tell you right now, the best way some have put it, I think it's quoting Churchill to say, this isn't the end or the beginning of the end; it's the end of the beginning. And there's still a lot more that has to happen. On one hand, it was great to hear the president go out yesterday and stand with bipartisan senators and say we have a deal. But then very shortly after that, we had both the leadership in the Congress and the president himself making it sound like, but wait a minute, I won't vote, I won't sign that unless I have this other big deal that no one's agreed to yet. Not surprised that there's a little bit of ambiguity going on here, but certainly from a U.S. Chamber standpoint, I think from the business community standpoint, we've really been leaning in to say the only way we're going to get durable legislation passed is if we build consensus around it. I guess to jump to the end here and be as blunt as I can, the one thing we don't want to happen is for there to be, take away the 2017 tax cuts, or to somehow add on to this, or have use increase in corporate rates or capital gains, whatever, to pay for this infrastructure package. The good news at the moment is that the deal as it's come together doesn't include, tax increases, no corporate tax increases. Now, again, things can change between now and the time the deal comes together, but what really is critical, our big push right now is to essentially push on the leadership in Congress, the president himself, and frankly, at the rank and file in both parties to say, take yes for an answer. Take the win. You can actually get this piece passed. There's still more to do to figure out exactly what's in, what's not, and they may have to add a few things to, in some ways for every Republican you gain, you might lose a progressive on the other side. So a lot of game playing that has to go on here. But from our standpoint, it's critical that our message stays very focused. This is, first of all, just getting the infrastructure bill passed, as Neil was saying. Congress and the presidents and administrations have failed for years. We're on the cusp of actually being able to put $1 trillion into the economy for critical infrastructure needs. Let's not lose this opportunity. So what we're saying now is that don't hold hostage the opportunity to not only improve our roads and bridges, but replace lead pipes to homes, to close the digital divide on broadband, and all those other things come. Don't hold that hostage to a $5 trillion deal that they don't have the votes for. So that's, I think the other critical factor there is that if we can get them to focus on passing that infrastructure, there's much less of a chance we're going to see the corporate tax increases that we know we can't support.
Yeah, important points. One of the things that you and I had a chance to talk a little bit about this was when let's assume that that everything goes well and it does get passed and we have $1.2 trillion that is going to go out. How exactly is that going to be delivered to the states, to the local municipalities? So here in Miami-Dade, we really need a lot of infrastructure funding. We've got aging sewer systems. We have I can't remember, over a couple 100,000 homes that are still on septic, and then we have a sea level rise situation that's putting at risk billions upon billions of dollars of investment downtown. Marty, I don't know if you've had the chance to be down here and see the growth that we've seen, the change in the skyline in the last 10, 15 years. It's impressive, and it's going to get even more impressive. So it's extremely important that we get that. So how can we see this money coming down? Mark, I'm going to open that to you as well, if you've got some insight to that. How can we see that coming down, and how can we in Miami-Dade and really the South Florida region work to make sure that there are proper investments down here?
I'll make 2 quick points and then turn it over to Mark. One being, they're just now writing the legislation. So but it is anticipated they're simply building on existing programs. Okay, so in fact, it does include the core programs that already exist, and now what more are we putting on that? So we anticipate processes for how do you obtain that will go through the same type of process. There may be new programs that get put in there, but generally that same process. The other important point is that there's a House Surface Transportation bill that's going to go to the floor next week. So it's moving on a separate track, just as the Senate's trying to. I know it's very confusing. We've got this big infrastructure package, but you have the general surface transportation bill. The important thing here is that the House Surface Transportation bill includes a lot of what in the past we called earmarks, right? Well, the only way for members of Congress to see those earmarks come through is if it ends up being part of this big infrastructure package. Earmarks can't live in a reconciliation bill, and I won't get into all the details and process of reconciliation. But it's another motivator for saying, if you've got Florida members that manage to get money in through the earmark process, then they want this package to move.
Yeah, hey, Alfred, first of all, I agree with everything Marty just said. I don't think I can add anything. I think the 2017 tax reforms and what's happening with infrastructure, I think, Marty, you just nailed that. And I'm glad that we're on the same side, same team. I think Alfred, your question about timing, Hurricane Michael was in 2018. And just last week, we started seeing federal money flow over to the Panhandle. So I guess what I would say, Alfred, is the speed of business is let's make a decision and let's do it now. The speed of government is, they've proven during COVID that they can act fast, but they call it a crisis, right? So government's crisis speed is the regular speed of business. So if the federal government can see infrastructure as a crisis, both from a stimulus, and as we've got crumbling infrastructure. Florida doesn't have a lot of crumbling infrastructure. We have some of the safest roads and bridges in the United States. You want to talk about what's unfair? It's unfair that Florida taxpayers are paying for bad decisions that government officials have made in Michigan and California and Illinois because they didn't replace their pipes. They didn't replace their roads. They have bridges that are being closed down because they weren't maintained. That's not the Florida story. We have 40 years of political leaders who've actually made record investments in infrastructure funding. So one more time, Florida is going to be a donor state where our taxes go to Washington and they go to states who've not been responsible. Again, that's a story for another day, but it's something Miami leaders need to keep in mind that, we have to take what's happening in Washington and be mindful of it. But I would rather ask, what can we control in Florida? And let's make decisions based on what we can control and hope for the best and fight for the best in Washington alongside Marty and our partners at the U.S. Chamber.
Well, that's an excellent point. And I think we saw some huge gains this past legislative session on those that I mentioned, septic sewer. I also mentioned sea level rise. There's some incredible it's been paid lip service before, but now we've got a check being written to the Florida taxpayers to help those investments survive. So tell us a little bit about that, what we can expect from the bill that came out. I guess it part of it was taking Sbdc and splitting it in three. And what can we expect in the near term from that funding, Mark?
Yeah, and Marty, sorry that we're talking about a state issue here, but so first of all, workforce housing, let me just start there, is a crisis in Florida, right? So we might not teach economics in our classrooms and civics in our classrooms anymore, but we all know that when we have 900 people a day moving to Florida, that's going to put a demand on housing stock. And our teachers and our firefighters and our nurses, when they cannot afford to live in the communities that they work in, that's a problem. And so pre-COVID, workforce housing was one of the crises that we have in Florida. We have a program in Florida called the Sbdc the trust fund. And what's supposed to happen is hundreds of millions of dollars go into a trust fund, and they're supposed to be used for affordable housing, affordable workforce housing. I think everyone knows, and it's no secret, every year the legislature steals or takes those trust fund dollars and puts them back into a general fund. And some of them end up going back to the purpose that they were meant for. Now, that's what generally happens, not always. Kudos to the legislature and the governor this year, because a lot more dollars have made its way back into affordable housing. And I think they'll continue to make their way there in the future. But to your point, Alfred, some of the dollars were put into resiliency dollars. Some of those dollars were put into environmental stewardship, under the theory that if we don't deal with sea level rise, and if we don't deal with septic to sewer conversions, we're going to have a whole nother housing crisis on our hands. And again, kudos to the governor and the legislature. I know not everybody agreed with using the dollars this way, but we need to make our communities more resilient, our communities more environmentally sustainable, if in fact, over the long term. Remember I said before, we're going to add 4 million more people to our state and 50 million more visitors over the next 10 years. Well, they have to have a place to live and they have to have a place to stay. And if we don't get our environmental house in order, and if we don't get our resiliency house in order, then it's going to be exponentially more expensive to deal with workforce housing down the road. So I think this is the right decision. And that's the quickest way I can give you an overview of kind of the why behind what they did.
Yeah, but I think, and I think if I'm gonna check my numbers, you know them better than I do, but I think it was like a $200 million was to go to resiliency and septic to sewer, correct? And yeah. And
I have those numbers about 100 feet from where I am. I'll send them to you as soon as we're off this call, and you can include them for your group.
Well, I think that the issue then is that's a great start. And of course, this is a huge problem. It's costs a lot of money, and just a Miami Beach investment in pumps, which only sometimes work, meaning that the sea level rise it sometimes outpaces the pumps. That costs $400 million. So there's no question that this is that's a great start. It's not enough money, especially when you look at statewide issues. Because Miami isn't the only one that's being affected. Now, there's no question in my mind that it's going to take the business sector partnering with. I mean, listen, you said it. Businesses move at a faster speed, and certainly probably not at the same speed as the water's rising in terms of our actions right now. So we're going to have to get involved. We put together a study with Eulois that talks about the business case for investing in that. But how do you see, Mark and Marty? I guess it has to be something that's on the U.S. Chamber's radar as well. How do we get the business sector and government to partner to really start moving the needle on solutions here?
Yeah, Marty, you want to go first?
Well, sure. Just to jump in, I do think that this is a part of the challenge and that we're having this whole debate on how to pay for it. Always ends up being the hardest part of the discussion. Nobody wants to raise taxes. Chamber has long said we should raise the gas tax, what have you. Point here is that a lot more conversation is now building behind the idea of public-private partnerships. And what is it that we can do to have much clearer partnerships with the business community itself, allowing for financing options that provide some longer term certainty. Now, public-private partnerships have had some challenges in different parts of the country, but overall, it's proven itself to be a really effective way of getting things not only funded but moving more quickly. So that's from a federal standpoint. I think that's obviously they're always talking about an infrastructure bank and private activity bonds and other things that can help move things along. But I think that's where, at the federal level, the debate is going.
Yeah, I agree with Marty completely. I think also in the macro picture, I think we have a challenge with there's the political side of this, Alfred, which most elected officials, not all, but most elected officials are thinking about. Okay, on the next election, what are the 2 or 3 issues that are going to get me elected or unelected? On the business side, you have to look at pain, right? So if sea level rise is going to start increasing my property insurance rates by 100%, 200%, 300%, or if the municipal wastewater facility cannot get insured because of rising sea levels, and all of a sudden you have to move, potentially $1 billion asset, and people in the community are going to pay higher property insurance rates so that you can move, whether it's power generation, whether it's wastewater facilities, hospitals. By the way, insuring homes is pennies on the dollar compared to insuring, power plants and hospitals. And you try to move I-95, right? How much does that cost? So to me, we're dealing with a little bit of a gap. Remember I said in my presentation, follow the facts. Well, let's get Warren Buffett on the phone, who's a major investor in reinsurance company. Let's get a real handle on when are all of our property insurance rates going to go up substantially because of this. And let's get the banks on the phone and find out, when are you going to stop giving us mortgages for properties, that are going to be uninsurable and uninhabitable if we don't deal with this. So, I hate to say it, but what I'm trying to do as a realist in the room here, we have to bring some reality to the political side and to the family pain side and get a real clear picture. Remember I said earlier, what if every political leader in Miami-Dade County were focused on the same goals? Well, we can talk sea level rise and resiliency all we want to. If we don't understand the pain of no action and inaction, then we're going to be talking about this in 30 years. So we can pay pennies on the dollar now, or we can pay for it afterwards. And I vote for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think, Marty, you both bring up the whole issue of PPP. Listen, our number one issue is transportation. Our number two issue is workforce housing. Our number three issue is resiliency. So all of them are intertwined. We down here in transportation, we've seen some of the best solutions coming out of PPP relationships, where it's in Broward County. I think we've got 595 expansion that I don't think cost the taxpayers anything. I mean, the company financed it itself and is getting paid back on a modest toll in the speed lane rule. There's some incredibly creative ways to do that, and the way the point we've taken, and it's coming out of our resiliency committee, is we can either see resiliency as a problem, or we can see it as a business prospect and opportunity. And I think that when you get the business sector looking at problems as opportunities, that's when things get solved. So anyway, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but listen, let me turn our attention for a second to what you both talked about. Probably the most important issue facing us right now, the closest alligator snapping at us, and that's the work shortage crisis. And I think you put it the right way. It is a crisis. And I think, we've been hearing about it for months and months and months now. Kudos to the governor for the action he's taken to begin to solve the problem by modifying the unemployment benefits structure. But I suspect, and what I've been hearing from our employers and what I've been hearing from some of the employees, is that it's a little bit more nuanced. It's a little bit more complicated than that. There are a lot of other issues that are involved here, things from childcare, availability to transportation, but also one that I think is very important to our way of thinking, which is this whole, Mark, you talked about it, this whole issue of workforce retraining. Marty, you talked about a program that I hadn't heard of before, which is this was it you, Marty, that talked about the employer base, or was it you, Mark?
It was Neil, actually.
Yeah, Neil. So it's this investment in employer-led quick retraining programs. And I want you both to spend a little time talking. Marty, let me turn to you for a second. Just talking on the federal level. What are we talking about here, and what are some of the ideas coming out of the U.S. Chamber? And then, Mark, I want to get you to do the same.
Yeah, well, as Neil laid out, and I'll just maybe go a little bit further on this. we very early on kind of identified this worker shortage and this crisis, because every company we're talking to, no matter what company Suzanne Clark, new president CEO, has been talking to, or Neil, or what's the biggest challenge you have right now? It's worker shortage. So we had to kind of quickly say, okay, but what do we have to do to change that? And the first thing to be able to focus on was that $300 extra unemployment insurance. So right sizing the unemployment insurance was a quick and easy. To your point though, Alfred, we very clearly said that's not the only issue. There are plenty of other issues that layer on here, but that was one that clearly we had, especially in the small and medium-sized business, saying that was a major issue for them to be able to get people back in the door. Secondly, as you noted, the employer-led rapid retraining. So not just let's have some more government retraining programs or what have you, but how do we pull the employers into that conversation and allow them to be leading the discussion and the direction on how those retraining programs go along. And the final thing that Neil mentioned that we don't want to lose sight of is immigration policy. The U.S. Chamber has leaned into this for years now. So it's not just the H-1B, H-2B, and the J visas, but just expanding the legal immigration numbers so that we do have this worker shortage, and we know that. Again, addressing our immigration policy is going to help us resolve at least in part, the crisis we're facing.
So before Mark answers, Marty, tell us a little bit more about the employer-led quick retraining. What does that look like? How does that get funded? Where do the sources of retraining come from? What's the thought there?
Alfred, let me, for them, I don't have all the details myself, but I will make sure I'll get the materials and get them sent to you.
Yeah, that's great. Mark?
Yeah, thanks. And Marty, thanks for that. So a couple of quick things. So first of all, I think it's important to know this $300, weekly incentive not to work made perfect sense for our country when there were no jobs, when the government was shutting down jobs. And now what we're talking about, Florida's Exhibit A here, we have more open jobs than people looking for jobs. It makes no sense to pay people not to work anymore. So let's be clear about that. Also, the childcare issues that we've talked about, right? Like let me give you some numbers. We've had over 460,000 Floridians who were working actively stop looking for work. They're not even looking for work anymore. The majority are women who are deciding to stay home to take care of children. This is a national issue, and we need to figure out how we're going to solve that on a go-forward basis. One headwind that Florida has that other states don't have is we have a constitutional amendment to pay $15 an hour wages, which really is a $20 an hour wage, because anybody who was earning $15 now is going to expect $20. That's just the way that the world works. If you think about what an average childcare worker earns, it's less than $15 an hour. So what we just did through this mandate that was popular is we just made childcare more expensive and less affordable for people who are trying to get back into the workplace. So de facto, it's an easy decision to stay home, because by the time you add unemployment benefits to the cost of childcare, that again is a decision most families, it's what my family would do, right? So let's keep that in mind. The second thing, or the third thing that a lot of people aren't talking about, in our country, we have a lot of Americans 55 and older that were planning to retire in 10 years. And through the pandemic, through the social unrest that's happening across our country, talk to any home builder in Florida and ask them how they're doing, right? They're having record months, month after month after month. We are seeing hundreds of thousands of people 55 and over decide to accelerate their retirement to Florida plans. And so they're selling, they're downsizing, they're just done, right? They're not going back to work. They've just said, heck with it. I'm moving to Florida. I'm retiring early. So all of that contributes to where we are. Now to your second part, rapid credentialing. Remember what I said earlier, U.S. News and World Report said for 5 years in a row, Florida has the #1 rated colleges and universities. There's not another state in America that can keep up with what we're doing on certificates or credentials of value. And if you look at what the Department of Education did, what Chancellor Henry Mack did, what our 28 state colleges are doing, what the governor did, if you look at rapid credentialing and what Florida has done, there's nobody else doing what we're doing. And if you look at House Bill 1507 that the governor just literally signed, this takes Florida to a whole nother level. And so I think it's important that President Biden and Congress are talking about credentials of value and talking about retraining Americans. Florida's actually doing it. And you know what if you put CareerSource in a room and you put Madeline Pumariega in a room and you talk about what's Florida doing, the rest of the country's talking about how to be like Florida. Last thing I'll say, Alfred, is the Florida Chamber Foundation has a long history of putting out game-changing workforce reports. Next week, we will be releasing the Florida 2030 Skills Gap Analysis. And for the first time in Florida's history, instead of looking at companies and their needs, we're also looking at occupations and existing inventory of skill sets in Florida. We have a number of industries that are oversupplied, believe it or not, on skills. And what we've done is we've mapped out those skill sets that Floridians have right now. And we've mapped out for them the quickest way, if through rapid credentialing, if they just get 1 or 2 or 3 credentials, they'll actually be remarketable in the workforce. And this is a big advantage that Florida is going to have. So when you see your local state college, when you see your workforce boards, thank them, because they're going to be on the front lines of helping Florida employers get people retrained in a rapid way. And Florida's setting the pace for this nationally.
That's great, Mark. Thank you for that. And we'll look forward to doing that. And I'm promising our committee chairs that all are on the call with us that I'll get that out to them. But this is a very important point. And Miami-Dade County is really blessed to be able to, we sit in the middle of 3 major universities and colleges that are doing incredible work. The FIU, Miami-Dade College, and then as well. And we have Barry University, we have St. Thomas Aquinas. And I do want to, I see that our chair, who heads the career for South Florida, puts in apprenticeship programs, OJT, and customized training program as other initiatives. That's going to be for us, I think, one of the new issues that we're going to lean into. We're having our education and our HR committee sort of lean in together and try to come up and support these initiatives. Let me just, we only have a few minutes left, but I don't want to leave the topic of resiliency. Mark, we've got a governor that basically made it possible for the word climate change and sea level rise and resiliency to be used and to really start being addressed from the get-go. I think the very first thing he put out, he selected a chief resiliency officer for the state, someone who was so good that we lost her to the federal government. But we now have this past year passed and created a Resiliency Commission. How do you see all this developing over the next few years, Mark? Where is resiliency going from the legislature standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's here to stay. And I actually think words matter here, Alfred. And I think that, whether people want to talk about climate change or resiliency or sea level rise, look, not many people dispute that we're in a period where we have sea level rise. Not many people dispute that. But if you put 10,000 people in a room in Miami today, and I say, those who believe in climate change go over here, those who don't go over there, you just split the room in half, 50-50. So look, words, people can say whatever they want to say, but it's pretty well defined that sea level rise is happening, and we can argue about why all day long. And meanwhile, while we argue for 50 years, we're going to be underwater. So, the right approach here is to, let people call it whatever they want to. And I don't judge people by what they want to call it. And I would encourage everybody else to focus on results and let's get results. Look, this is here to stay. Thanks to Governor DeSantis's leadership on this. You're right. He puts his actions right where his words are. And you're right. We now have a group that's focused on this. If you look at the Florida 2030 Blueprint, which is the report that I mentioned before, one of the top 3 goals that we call for Florida is that every county and every resident of Florida is covered by a resiliency plan. Not only Miami, all 22 million residents of Florida are covered by a statewide and regional resiliency plan, by the way, backed up by an economic development plan, right? So I think when you have the business community calling for it, when you have the governor calling for it, when you actually have apparatus put in place to make it happen, doesn't mean everybody's going to like it, doesn't mean you're going to like the decisions, but the mechanisms are in place. And leadership has said, this is the direction we're going to go. I think we all need to get behind it and, make sure that the right decisions are made.
Alfred, if I could, I think you and Mark make a very important point on this. And here are the climate debate in Washington, of course, just as Mark described it. You can't get 2 people in the room that have the same idea of what it should be. But from a business standpoint, there's very few companies these days that are not feeling the same kind of external pressures from institutional investors, their shareholders, their workforce, the public, to do something. That's why you've seen so many of them make strategic business decisions on setting out targets for zero or net zero by some date, what have you. You can, and I think again, those are strategic business decisions that are being made. The important point here is that something has to move on this topic for us to make progress. And having voices from the business community, from states like Florida and your elected leadership saying, let's get away from the definition. Fact is, we have to focus on adaptation and mitigation in addition to, what are the other things we can do to transition to, whether it's call it a decarbonized economy, a cleaner energy future, whatever it is. But voices like Florida's and the businesses that you both represent are going to be really important voices to making progress in that space.
Thank you. Neil, what in 1 minute, I think we really need to hear what the Florida Chamber is doing in terms of prosperity, because I think for me, that's one of the things that is just a brilliant streak of work by the Florida Chamber in terms of really seeing that there's a business reason for making sure that we raise all boats, right? I mean, we raise the water for everyone, because if we don't deal with some of the issues that are barriers to prosperity for some of the folks in our communities, we're going to be anchored and tethered and never be able to get as high as we all can. So talk a little bit about what the Florida Chamber is doing there and how we can get involved on a local level.
Right. And Alfred, thanks for giving me a floor on that. And I think Marty and I would probably agree. One of the most important things that chambers of commerce can do is raise awareness to what some of the challenges are in our communities and our country, and also bring to light what some of the solutions are. Because what I find is business leaders are so busy thinking about their company and where to go next that they assume that, other people are sort of on things like poverty and things like early learning. So about 5 years ago, when I testified in front of Congress on this issue, one of the things we discovered was in Florida, we have 3 million people in poverty. At the same time, we're creating 1 out of every 11 new American jobs. And you just stop and think about, how's this possible? But beyond the 3 million people in poverty, we have over 800,000 children living in poverty in Florida. And here's a number, and Alfred, I'll finish with this. Florida has 983 zip codes. And if you heat map out, where do these 829,000 kids live in these 983 zip codes? Half of all of our kids in poverty in Florida live in just 15% of our zip codes. In fact, if you go to Marlins Park and you look from the park down to downtown, the second, third, and fourth zip codes with the most kids in poverty are right there in that stretch between Marlins Park and downtown Miami. If you go to the FloridaGapMap.org and you mouse over your county, you can find out how many kids live in poverty in every single zip code. So in working with the Federal Reserve and in working with the United Way, we've come up with what's being called around the country the Florida model. And what the Florida model looks to is not government to solve some of these challenges, but how can we organize businesses at the zip code level? What if Miami Chamber members in each of your zip codes worked together and looked at our 10 root causes of poverty, right? From job training to food insecurity to crime to, maybe I'm a skilled nurse, but I don't have a way to get to work, right? So we have transportation issues and health issues and job training issues. And by the way, you can't focus on one of these. All 10 are required. And all 10 are things that the business community can uniquely do to create economic opportunity and resiliency and vibrancy. Here's the deal, and no offense, Marty, but Congress can't fix poverty problems. The state can't fix poverty problems. The county's too big to fix poverty problems. If I was born into poverty in one side of Dade County, I may actually never in my life make it to the other side of Dade County. Poverty is going to be changed by free enterprise, and it's going to be changed at the neighborhood zip code level. So I think one of the biggest accomplishments of our career, guys and gals, is, how do we take free enterprise? How do we bring it into the zip code level and not wait on government, but actually do this in a measurable way at the zip code by zip code level? We are looking, Alfred, for 983 businesses to step up and take ownership of one zip code. For example, Florida Blue has just announced they're taking 5 zip codes throughout Florida, and their company is going to put the management on it and the resources into it. Can you imagine if we can get businesses to step up and say, we're going to make sure that the right things happen in the zip code where my company's headquartered? Game gets changed, and it's only going to happen when the business community says enough is enough. So thanks for giving me a stage for that. And Alfred, thanks for being part of the program that we're working on.
Thanks, Mark. And Marty, thank you both. Mark, I pledge to you, we're going to look at that seriously and see how we can get involved in those 3 zip codes. I'm often at Marlins Park looking in that direction. So it's heartbreaking to know that we're the number 1, 2, and 3 looking at
2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4. Wow.
Broward's got you beat for number 1, but you're 2, 3, and 4.
That's a number 1 place I'm glad to lose.
Okay, Mark, I have me personally, I'm chairman of the board of a regional charity whose mission is to end poverty. You're singing my tune, so
wow.
I really admire you for doing it.
I'll catch back up, Marty. Maybe we can help each other. Thank you.
This is great stuff. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I know that you've proven to really be founts of knowledge for all of our committee chairs and vice chairs. And I know that we're going to have better goals and stronger vision for the future because of it. Really appreciate the partnership that we have, and you know that you can count on us. Please call on us anytime that there's something that we can help on a local level with. We will be in Florida and in DC again this year, live in person, thank God, and look forward to seeing you all there when we go. So for all of us who are on the program today, please remember that our goals conference continues on Monday and Tuesday, when we're going to start having sort of rolling up our sleeves and doing the hard work of writing the goals. We're going to have the recording of this up on our website later on today. Mark, thanks for allowing us to have the deck that you showed, and we'll have a link to that as well. Gentlemen, again, thank you. Thank you for the great work you do. We look forward to seeing you again. And for everyone else, have a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you.